A lot of dancers make the mistake of thinking that restaurant shows are for them, but they aren't. Restaurant shows are for the audience, and you need to really take your audience into consideration when you're planning your set for a restaurant show. Americans have a much shorter attention span, so the songs need to be shorter and they need to be upbeat, and there needs to be a lot of variety. So for example, doing a really long talk scene probably won't hold the attention of an American audience for more than just a couple of minutes. If you have a song that's too slow, unless the music's really loud, the sound of the restaurant's just going to drown it out. You know, restaurant audiences don't always respond to the things that, say, an audience full of belly dancers would respond to. They really like big movements, they like fast music. So, sometimes they'll get excited about layered shimmies and difficult technical things, but a lot of times they don't really realize how difficult some of that stuff is, and if it's small and intricate, they could sort of start losing interest. So I think it's important to realize that you're there to sort of create a spectacle, and you're there to come out and be larger than life in your sparkly costume and with your glamorous makeup, and you're there to have a big personality and to create a mood of fun. Unless I'm trying to work on having graceful hands, I always wear finger cymbals in restaurant shows. I feel like it commands more attention in a restaurant environment. If you walk out finger cymbals blazing, people are going to stop and they're going to look up, and it's like, whoa, the show is starting. But you have to be really careful when you're playing your finger cymbals in a restaurant environment, because you need to be really aware of the volume of the surroundings around you and the volume of your finger cymbals. Sometimes you can just kind of play your finger cymbals a little bit muted in a smaller restaurant, and it's much better. I almost always include some section of my performance where I'm balancing something on my head, and it's not necessarily the best way to show off my technical dance skills, but it's something that gets a really big audience reaction. The typical restaurant set is between 20 and 25 minutes. And if I'm lucky enough to have a stage, I'll spend the first maybe 10 or 15 minutes on that stage, and then the remainder of the time is spent in the audience collecting tips and doing audience participation. Also, I think that it's really important to be able to do your performance in the round. I mean, you can see here I'm totally surrounded by people, and I'm always kind of turning, and I'm always trying to make sure that my back isn't to any particular part of the room for an extended period of time. You need to always be looking around you. There's going to be children who have the potential to be running around down by your legs. There are going to be waiters who are standing directly behind you. There are going to be, patrons walking around. You just have to kind of make do with what you have. In some restaurants, you're just dancing between tables. There's no dance floor, and you're just right there in front of people, and you don't have any space to dance, and you have to share that non-existent space with the staff of the restaurant. Every show is different, and you never really truly know what you're walking into, so you need to learn very early on to be able to make do with what you've got. If you only have 3 square feet to dance in, you should be able to turn up your personality and do a variety of moves and different things that are going to keep a 20 to 25 minute show interesting. The people who hire you don't want to hear a bunch of excuses about why the show was boring or why it could have been better. They just expect that they're hiring a professional dancer and that they're going to be entertained. One of the best things that you can do for your performance level is to have a regular restaurant show, because you get to practice performing in what can sometimes be very adverse circumstances. The restaurant owners are not there to create the perfect dancing environment for you. Rather, they're there to make a profit, and they're there to make their customers happy. So, therefore, you might arrive to your show to find that there isn't space for you to dance, or that your music isn't loud enough, or that the floor is filthy, or maybe people are just seated in a way that they can't even see the show, or maybe people are ignoring your show, Or maybe there's someone sitting close to where you're dancing just giving you dirty looks. All of these things can happen in restaurant shows, and you need to be able to rise to the occasion and be a professional and deliver no matter what else is going on. When you're the belly dancer at a private party or at a restaurant, your job is to make a show. You're like the hostess of the party, and you need to be sure that you make it fun and that you make it special, and you want to make kind of a spectacle and make a show. You want to help them sort of break the ice and move into a more kind of hang loose part of the evening. You want to get them up to dance, and you want to make them feel comfortable that it's okay to party a little bit. It's okay to have some fun. They're not there necessarily to see you belly dance, although you belly dancing is definitely something that they could enjoy, but your job is to make the event something memorable for them. Your job is to make sure that they're having a good time. It's a job. I mean, it's a fun job, but it's a job, and it isn't all about you. If, in fact, the audience is outshining you and the audience is just being wild and you're just kind of in the background clapping and playing your finger cymbals, that's okay. That means you're doing a really good job. That means that they're having a great time. I know some dancers who are really ready to be offended by their audience. They kind of come into a show with an attitude like, these men are going to be sleazy, or someone's going to do something inappropriate, or these people aren't going to appreciate my art. You definitely need to have your boundaries and know where you draw the line with audience participation and be really firm about that. But you also need to be able to learn how to get out of situations gracefully, because once you start screaming at your audience members, you've kind of passed a point of no return. These guys are helping me off of the table by physically picking me up. And I definitely would not have let this happen at a private party, but I actually know these guys. They're regulars at this restaurant. They're there with their families, and it was okay. But in another situation, I might have even stopped the show and refused to dance. Middle Eastern audiences love it when you get up and dance on a table, and oftentimes they won't take no for an answer, but it can also be really dangerous. When you're dancing on a table, you need to keep your feet planted firmly on the table. You have to keep your knees bent, and you should have your feet placed in more of a karate stance position. Don't have your feet parallel, because sometimes people will reach up in your belt and try to tip you while you're on the table, and they'll actually pull on your belt, and it can make you lose your balance. Before you get up on a table, you want to know where the legs are. If there's just one thick leg in the very center of the table, as is the case in most restaurants, you want to make sure that you're dancing directly in the center of the table. Also, make sure that someone relatively sober holds your hand as you're climbing up onto the table and getting down off of the table. I always make an effort to include everyone. Children are wonderful audience members. I always try to get children up to dance. It's a great way to kind of get the ball rolling. And I do try to include everyone in the form of at least saying hello to them and acknowledging them and letting them know that I'm glad that they're at this show. Not everybody's going to want to get up and dance with me, and that's okay. I don't want to overly pressure people who genuinely do not want to get up to dance, but those people can still participate in the show in other ways, even if it's just making eye contact and smiling. If there's a guest of honor, you want to kind of acknowledge that. Again, you don't want to necessarily drag someone up to dance who doesn't want to dance. I really kind of feel that is sort of a desperate maneuver, and it's not, I don't know, you shouldn't be manhandling people. But you want to at least do something to let them know that you acknowledge that it's their party and they're the guest of honor. You also want to be genuinely happy to see people. Don't be afraid of people. If you walk up to people and you're really friendly and happy, most of the time they're going to be really responsive to that. You don't want to be afraid of them. You want to greet them. You want to make them feel special. It probably goes without saying that when someone gives you a tip, you should say thank you and acknowledge that they gave you a gift and they didn't have to do that. And you want to make an effort to be approachable and friendly and make people feel at ease. Again, the audience participation part is the top priority, and them feeling comfortable and not feeling snubbed by you and feeling accepted and feeling like it's a smooth interaction, that's the most important thing. It sounds a little bit funny to say, but collecting tips should not be about the money. Don't get me wrong, you need to charge what you're worth when you're going to do a private party, and you need to be respected and you need to be assertive about money when you're negotiating your price before the party. But when you are in the process of collecting tips and doing audience participation, it is not about the money at all. Let the money fall out of your costume and don't worry about it. Don't look preoccupied with money at all. I think that that's really kind of tasteless. You want to be the elegant, expensive dancer who doesn't care about that. If you're charging what you're worth, you will not need tips to be happy with the amount of money that you made at the end of the show. One time someone tipped me a $100 bill and it fell out of my costume and somebody stole it off the floor, I don't know who, and I never got it back. But it was a good lesson for me because I now know if there's a bill and I really want to keep it, I need to take a moment and tuck it deeply into my costume where it's not going anywhere. That's my responsibility. At the end of your show, there'll be money on the floor, and even after you've changed into your cover-up, you still don't want to be crawling around on the floor picking that money up. You want either an employee of the restaurant to get it, or sometimes I ask a little kid to pick it up for me, and then I'll give them $1 as a thank you or something like that. But if somebody else picks your chips up for you, they should not be counting them or taking a percentage. Absolutely not. There have been some parties where there were tips all over the dance floor and I couldn't get anybody to pick them up for me, and I left without those tips because that's how strongly I feel that the dancers should not be crawling around on the floor for money.